To iMARA Woman Magazine. I'm Wendy Brawley, and I'm extremely excited about today's show because it's the start of our 5th season. So welcome back. But we've got so many new things in store for you this season, and I am here today with the newest of our additions, our new co-host. I'm happy to introduce our new co-host at iMARA Woman Magazine. We have to my right, Ms. Jessica Martinez.
Hi.
We have next to her, Dr. Marcia Bavard-Wynn.
Hi.
And to my far right, we have Donna Ayers.
Always on the right.
Well, listen, you are not going to have any shortage of opinion from these lovely ladies around the table. And we hope that what we're able to do as we tackle the issues that you care about with more than just talk, that we're able to enlighten you and inspire you to handle the challenges that you face in your busy lives. So ladies, are you ready to get started?
Let's go.
Get started.
Well, if you picked up the latest copy of iMARA Woman Magazine, you probably noticed that our edition was dedicated to conflict, controversy, and violence. And I'm just going to read a couple of the headlines. Husband shot wife in back and kills self. Road rage ends in shooting. Sheriff deputy shot while responding to a domestic call. Woman arrested for shooting husband during dispute. Neighbor shot to death while trying to break up a fight.
Wow.
Pregnant woman shot, body burned. And these are the headlines, not from some other place, but right here in the Midlands of South Carolina. What is going on?
Well, I believe that it's lack of education. I think sometimes people need to be taught what to do as far as treating each other. Sometimes it could be domestic violence in the house where, you know, dad beat up mom because she didn't cook right, and you know, the daughters thought that was okay, and the son saw that was okay, and then it goes from one generation to another. So I think a lot of it has to do because of lack of awareness and lack of education.
Just like Jessica said, a lot of that is environmental exposure. If you emulate the behavior that you grew up around. If you have more negative influences in your life, you're going to act that way and respond to conflict that way. If you saw your mother reacting that way and that's how things were handled in your household, you're going to respond in kind. I think a lot of it also now, even with some of the things you read, is impulsive behavior. Those were people who were mentally stable at one point, but just life, stress, and situations like estranged spouses, or one of them that you read. You just react, you're more reactive because you're basing it on emotions at that time and don't know how to handle it. You don't go and get professional help and talk through things like you should, or talk to friends, family, even your pastor. Some people just react and then they regret it later.
Back to your comment, I don't think that's something that we lay at the feet of our educators. I think there is a role to play, that sometimes children don't get that guidance in school, but ultimately it begins at home with the parents to teach kids manners and how to deal with one another in a proper way. I think overall the problem is just our culture and the exposure we have to violence in our culture on TV, in video games, in the movies. When I was coming along, we didn't have that. You know, somebody got bonked on the head during hee haw and everybody laughed, but you know, that was it. But I think it's like boiling the frog. We are becoming more and more accustomed to violence and more immune.
A lot of times that people talk about, well, it wasn't that violent when we were growing up, but you know, there was some violence around. And you know, I think, you know, we had parents that kind of protected us and helped us discern what was real and what isn't. And I don't know if parents are too busy, or I don't know what the answer is, but you know, there have always been violent movies and westerns and all that kids like to watch and adults like to watch. So how did we get to the point that we could say that And some people don't believe that movies influence people to act violently. I mean, do they really?
A lot of times now, parents have the TV babysitting the children.
Absolutely.
So you have a lot of reality shows, for instance, Real Housewives of Atlanta. You see how those women act, who are supposedly classy women. If you have your child, your daughter, watching those women and imitating that behavior, and they act the way those women do, you actually can't blame the child. If your TV is babysitting your child, that's a problem.
That's a good
and
point.
that does start at home.
Yeah, it does. Well, listen, we got to take a little break. Hold these thoughts, and we'll be right back, okay?
It's a change of focus from a patient-doctor to more of a team-based approach.
They have really worked as a team just to help me as a patient. I have to do my part, but I got something that's patting me on the shoulder that says, okay, let's go a little farther. And if they do that to me, I can imagine what they do with others. I'm very happy to know that somebody else cares about what I'm feeling and how I'm feeling.
Get the whole story at ahealthysc.tv. Blue Cross Blue Shield of South Carolina, because it matters how you're treated.
I'm speaking with Jay from Columbia, South Carolina. Jay, why do you think people resort to violence?
I think we just have a violent culture. I think people are just more prone to violence when they not necessarily see it everywhere, but are kind of told, I guess, that it's okay, you know, an eye for an eye, that kind of thing.
Okay. So what do you think as a society we can do to combat the lack of civility?
Well, first we can teach kids manners and teach kids that if someone is fighting someone, well, someone's fighting them, I would say, walk away, get an adult to help them, or just, not feed into someone else's fight. Or if they see someone being bullied, to, actually say, that's not right, because all it takes is like one person to change the herd.
People, I think that one of the issues in my belief is all the reality TV, and the crazier you act, the more fame you get. I think that one of the issues also is the lack of two people being in a household raising children, whether, I don't care if there's two women, two men, mom and dad, whatever it may be, but I think that kids aren't being raised, and those kids are growing up being, just crazy adults.
We've been talking about violence and conflict resolution and why it is that we tend in this society to react so violently when faced with conflict. And, it looks like we're kind of in agreement that a lot of it has to do with education, not necessarily the school system educating, but education at home, what kids are exposed to. So if that's the case, do we just give up then on a person or a kid who's come out of a violent background? I mean, is there hope for that child? I mean, how do we get some solutions to some of the violence? What should we be doing? As a lady said in the video, it's just crazy. Do we let it keep escalating until it gets crazy? What do we do?
It still starts at home. My mother's a retired principal, and she would have parents that would come to the school and dare her to chastise a child. I think we need to go back to the old concept of it taking a village to raise a child, because some of the principles from the older adults in our children's lives, we need to let them be an influence once again like they used to.
Yeah, that wasn't the case with us. Well, if the school called home, you got it at school, then you got it when you got home, and if so-and-so heard it on the way home, Miss So-and-so had a right to get you to.
I think there has to be a limit because, I'm not originally from the South, but wasn't it true that the teacher can give you a beating?
Yeah, we used to have corporal punishment whenever
I
was.
A lot of things they've removed. They need to bring some of those back. Now, corporal punishment may not be the way to go, because I think by hitting a child,
Isn't
you're
that
showing
violence?
violence.
Like you do something wrong,
Smack 'em around.
you're gonna get slapped. Well, listen.
I think as a society, like I said earlier, we become a little bit desensitized, and where we might see something going on where we would intervene and say, hey, let's everybody take a step back and calm down. We're not as likely to intervene as we used to be. So maybe a lot of times it just starts with us. The example of, even one child stepping in when he sees bullying.
And say, look, that's not right. Or go get an adult to help. But as adults, there are a lot of times that we see things in our everyday lives, at the homeowners association meeting, at the PTA, in the office, at church, in your Sunday school class, where sometimes things get a little heated. And, you know, we're always in a position to say, hey, you know, let's take a step back.
Yeah.
But then you have the problem where people say, you know, you need to mind your business.
Exactly.
So it's like you don't know exactly what to do. You don't know, should I intervene or should I just mind my business?
You know, one of the headlines was a neighbor who saw some young folks fighting and tried to break up the fight and ended up getting shot and killed. And that it's you know, it is a difficult balance to keep, especially when your own personal safety might be at risk to try to intervene. But we have to figure out something. I don't want to leave this segment without saying that in certain communities, particularly in the Black community, there is still taboo associated with getting help.
Yes. No, I think that's important because a lot of people, you talk to them and you say, well, you might need to see a therapist. I'm not crazy.
Crazy, you just mad.
Crazy mad.
Calm down, right? You know, do some yoga.
Meditate,
jog, you know.
Pray.
I know some people in some high-stress jobs, and they go and they call it running off the day before they go home to their families, just to release some stress and to get a new perspective. And you know, so little things like that can help as well.
If you know the things that are triggers for you, then you can find small term.
And that's, I think, where the professional can help you discern where your trigger points are so that you stay away from those trigger points. And if you get close to them, you know you're in a red zone and to seek help, back away. We've got a few minutes, and I do want to mention this topic because there's so much in the news, and that is the SNAP program, the Supplemental Nutrition Program that allows what we know as food stamps. There's some talk to make that program change so that you can only buy certain types of healthy food if you receive food stamps, and it has met with a great deal of controversy. Speaking of conflict and controversy, what's your opinion? Do you think, you know, government has a right in these instances to tell you what to eat?
I think if they're going to make any changes that make it a policy with regard to that program, they need to change it entirely. Don't say that the individuals receiving assistance can't buy potato chips or junk food. Make it easier for them to have healthier alternatives. Maybe offer them discounts for buying healthy, like fruits and vegetables or something. But I think it's almost nitpicking, because if you have a family who has to budget their food allowance for the month, they're buying what they can afford. So you need to make it less expensive for them to have healthier options if you're going to make that change in their lives.
That's a good point.
I think you're setting them up to fail.
It costs a lot of money to eat.
It costs more to eat healthier than it does to eat junk food, and that's the sad state of our economy right now.
I agree with that, but there are some retail chains, I guess, I don't know if we can say names here, but you know, super centers and that type of, they have gotten a little bit better about looking to provide fresh fruits and produce at lower prices for that very reason. I mean, we do have a problem with obesity in our state, and it's also important to look at it from the perspective that a lot of these people that are receiving SNAP are probably also receiving government assistance with health care. And so one thing in turn affects the other and the expenses there. So I think it's great that we would make changes to that program to encourage healthy eating. And I think Marcia made some good points as well.
The details are a little more complicated, but I think they're moving in the right direction.
Yeah, I think the challenge is getting buy-in, getting people to agree, particularly if that's your only source of nutrition. Is the food stamp.
I personally, I don't agree that the government should regulate what you eat. I'm not saying that we don't need to move in the direction as far as eating healthier food, but when the government starts telling you what you can and cannot eat, I mean, what is that?
But what about when the government is helping you pay for it? And the point I also made about, you know, a lot of those people are receiving government assistance in other programs as well.
Okay, but studies show that people that have these kind of programs, they're also working sometimes 2 and 3 jobs, and they still can't make ends meet. But that shouldn't be the reason why the government says, well, you can eat this, you can eat that, just because they're getting the assistance. The assistance is supposed to be temporary, not a long-term thing, but still, just because they have that assistance, that doesn't mean that they shouldn't be treated as a regular person that makes, makes decisions when they go to the supermarket. I just don't agree. I think they should definitely encourage, and maybe some mandatory workshops as far as nutrition is concerned, but to regulate what someone eats just because they're poor, I think it's wrong. That's just my opinion.
Well, it'll be interesting to see how this one works its way through the approvals that it will require from, I think it's USDA, if in fact South Carolina is able to get these changes implemented. And there are lots more, I'm sure that there will be lots more discussion, and we will have lots more conversation about it. Well, coming up next, we're going to talk about the Medicaid expansion program. South Carolina is one of several states across the nation who has decided pretty much that they are refusing to accept the Medicaid dollars from the federal government and refusing to expand Medicaid under the Affordable Care Act. And we're going to find out whether or not anything is being done at our local levels to determine how we can ensure that South Carolinians get the expanded health care services under Medicaid. So stay with us. We'll be right back.
We all have something neatly tucked away in the back of our mind. A secret hope. That thing we've always wanted to do. It's not about having dreams. It's about reaching them. An ally for real possibilities. AARP. Find tools and direction at aarp.org/possibilities.
Thanks for staying with us. Well, last year, the U.S. Supreme Court approved the constitutionality of the Affordable Care Act and implementation of its provisions across the country. Now, many of us know of the Affordable Care Act, ACA, as Obamacare. But included in this very important legislation was the expansion of Medicaid for all of the country. And of course, some states have decided, South Carolina being one, that they will not expand Medicaid. And the U.S. Supreme Court allowed that provision for states to opt out of the Medicaid expansion program. But what does opting out really mean for South Carolina? Well, here today to shed some light on this very important conversation and issue is Teresa Arnold, the Associate Director of Advocacy for AARP South Carolina.
And I'm delighted to be here because this is the most important issue we face in South Carolina this year, in my personal opinion.
I think you're right, Teresa. But before we delve into all of the nuances of Medicaid expansion, can you define for our viewers what exactly is Medicaid expansion?
Medicaid expansion is taking Medicaid and allowing working adults to access health care if they're making up to about $15,000 a year. So what you're looking at right now, currently, no adult who is not disabled can access Medicaid unless they are at a certain percent of poverty and they have children. So if you have children and you make at 50% of poverty, which is what, $6,000, $7,000 a year, you can go on Medicaid for a period of time. But other than that, there are no working adults, especially single working adults, who can access Medicaid, no matter what their income is. The Medicaid expansion would take that up to about $15,000 a year for a single individual, or families, if you get above that 50% of poverty. So if we don't expand Medicaid, if we don't accept those federal funds to provide health care for the lowest income working folks, then what we will have done is created a new coverage gap, which is horrible to think about, because what it means is everybody who makes above that will have access to tax credits to help pay for their insurance so that they can afford health care. So if you make $16,000 a year, you could access the tax credit on the new marketplace where they will be selling health insurance for folks. But if you make $14,000 a year, you have nothing.
And a lot of people in South Carolina, I presume, fall into those categories where they would not qualify.
That's exactly right. And the estimates vary, but the number that we're using, because it was the most recent number that I could get from the U.S. Census, is about 330,000 individuals who make less than $15,000 a year, but who do not have health insurance. And most of those folks, you know, whatever, if you're working someplace that's making less than $15,000, you're either part-time and no insurance, or you're working at some place that they don't pay insurance.
Well, you know, AARP is such a huge organization nationwide. Why is this organization, AARP, in the push for Medicaid expansion?
One of our top priorities has always been health care, that everyone should have access to affordable health care that's good quality. And in our country, obviously, I mean, we're one of the wealthiest countries in the world, but we don't provide health care, and we don't allow the access to health care. So AARP fought really, really hard to make sure that, especially adults 50 and older, you know, half of our membership is between 50 and 65. And a lot of those, 65,000 of those folks in South Carolina between 50 and 65 currently make less than $15,000 a year, and they do not have health care.
Wow, so that directly impacts AARP.
That's exactly right.
Well, so many people currently on Medicare don't really understand how the Medicaid expansion will help them. Can you kind of at least give us a connection between that?
Well, for one thing, studies have shown that, in fact, the Actuary Association of America, so these are actuaries who look at numbers all the time, they said if we don't take Medicaid expansion, everybody's premium goes up, because the Medicaid would help provide that coverage for people. If you are still having a group of hundreds of thousands of people who don't have access to health care, who are ending up in the emergency room, who get much sicker than they would have, it really impacts all of us, because the hospitals have to take these folks. They're required by federal law to, if someone walks in their door, they have to treat them.
Running out of time, but this is such an important issue. What can we do as regular South Carolinians, the 50-plus population? How can we help move the ball on Medicaid expansion in South Carolina?
Call your legislator. The House has already voted it down. It's going to the Senate, so I would be inclined right now to talk to your senator and tell them to please support this coverage for adults, working adults who are low income, the Medicaid expansion. The other thing they can do is go to remedysouthcarolina.com. That's REMEDYSC.com, and they can sign a petition that tells Governor Haley, please, please accept the Medicaid expansion.
Well, that's good to know. We'll make certain that that information gets out. Teresa, thank you so much for coming in and sharing this information with our viewers, because this is an important issue.
It's a hugely important issue, and why would we want to leave the lowest income folks on the side of the road?
Right.
And getting sicker all the time.
Well, I'm sure this is a topic that we will be hearing lots more about, and for all of our viewers, please go on and sign that petition at remedysc.com.
Right.
Thanks again, Teresa.
Thank you.
Well, with all the controversy we face every day in our lives, and with all the controversy we've already tackled on the show today, it's nice to know that comfort food is still there to give us the comfort that we need. But very often, comfort food is not very healthy. Luckily for us today, we have our registered dietitian in the iMARA kitchen to cook up one of your favorite comfort food dishes in a healthy way. Hey, Phyllis, what's cooking in the iMARA kitchen?
Thank you, Wendy, and welcome to the iMARA kitchen again. Today we're doing macaroni and cheese. We're going to make it a little healthier because, as you know, macaroni and cheese is one of those traditional things that we put a lot of eggs and high-fat cheese and butter. And although it tastes good, it's really not all that heart healthy. So today we're having reduced fat macaroni and cheese that tastes just as good. I bet if you serve it to your family, people say, oh, it's a little different, but it still tastes pretty good. So here I have 2 cups of cooked macaroni. We're going to use evaporated skim milk because it gives it that creamy texture. We have 1 egg slightly beaten, and you can also use egg beaters to reduce the fat even more, and you can't tell the difference in a recipe. And then we have 1.5 cups of reduced fat sharp cheddar cheese. And one of the tricks to making low-fat food taste better is to kind of give it a little kick. So we're going to add just a pinch of cayenne pepper, and that helps to kind of excite your taste buds so that you don't miss all of the extra fat that we really don't need for our hearts. And then a dash of hot pepper. a black pepper. And so here we have about a 1/4 cup of onion, something else to give a little savory taste. And we're going to cook them for just about 3 minutes in about a tablespoon of vegetable oil or canola oil. And you just want to sweat them a little so that you get all the flavors out of them. And then we're going to add that to our macaroni and cheese. One of the reasons that we wanted to do the macaroni and cheese is that, you know, when we're stressed or we're having a bad day, one of the things that we typically like that kind of helps us de-stress is high-fat foods. And as I was thinking about what happens, what people do is they go to really high-fat, high-carb foods. And actually there is some new science that says that there may be a biological reason why we go towards higher fat, high calorie, high sugar foods when we're stressed or a little depressed. Your stomach starts talking to your brain, and it does kind of help with some of that stress. So what we're going to do is just mix those onions in with the cooked and drained macaroni. We're going to add the 1/2 cup of evaporated skim milk. And as I said, using evaporated skim milk keeps the creamy texture that we like in our macaroni and cheese. I'm going to add 1 egg slightly beaten, or you could use about a 1/2 cup of egg beaters, which have no fat in them. And we'll just mix all that together and add our black pepper, about a quarter of a teaspoon, and then a pinch of cayenne pepper and cheese. So I have a 1/4 cup of sharp reduced fat cheddar cheese. I'm going to use almost most of it and stir into the macaroni and cheese. And you really don't need a whole lot of cheese to give you a good macaroni and cheese. And I also like to save a little to put a nice layer on top so it gets that real nice kind of brown look to the top. And just spread it around, and we will bake this until it's hot. At 350 degrees in the oven at 350 degrees, and let it sit for just a few minutes before you serve, and you'll have a wonderful macaroni and cheese. I'm gonna step back a minute and get the cooked one so you can see what it looks like. And here we have our really nice and creamy macaroni and cheese that's reduced fat and a lot healthier. And so thank you, and back to you, Wendy.
Well, that completes our show today. We hope that you enjoyed it and that you learned something that both inspired and empowers you. Well, remember, you can read about all the topics we've covered on today's show in the current edition of iMARA Woman magazine.
You can also read iMARA Woman magazine online in our e-magazine.
Don't forget to like iMARA Woman magazine on Facebook.
And follow iMARA Woman magazine on Twitter.
Well, thanks again for watching today's show. And until the next time, peace and blessings.